Okay, guys, welcome back to the TXG podcast. My name's Ian Fraser.
My name's Mike Marty-Savage.
We have a real treat for you guys, but it might actually be as much of a treat for us. We're joined by a really, really good friend of ours, Laird White. Laird currently works on tour operations with Honma Golf. Laird and I go back for as long as I've lived in Canada. I know Mike's has known Laird for pretty much as long.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Best part of a decade. So, Laird, it's great to have you with us.
Thanks, guys. Greetings from Victoria, British Columbia.
How are things out on the west side of the country?
Oh, it's well, we're all in uncharted territories as we know. But my daughter and I just got back from a walk along the ocean, and my gosh, it's truly God's country.
We have lots to still be very, very grateful for, despite the predicament we find ourselves in, don't we?
Yeah, it's I know that with the uncertainty, it's pretty scary. However, there are some bonuses that I know my 2.5-year-old has never been happier seeing me home on the regular and having mom home and stuff like that. So on that, it's been pretty special.
Very, very cool. Well, Laird, can you tell us a little bit about sort of the day-to-day that you have with Honma? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I would describe it as being on a roller coaster without a seatbelt, first and foremost, and that just has to deal with the tour world and how different it is every single day, and how different it is when you work with any of these elite, phenomenal athletes and all stars, and you can imagine how different one person's view is from one to the next, and so there's no cookie cutter approach, and as result, I think the gift is how much of a chameleon can you be, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a proper support way, and that's kind of the approach that I take, at least.
Yeah, you took the words out my mouth. I mean, the chameleon sort of approach is exactly, I think, part of the real art form. I mean, we apply a lot of science to what we do, but I think the art form is how we deliver that and how we approach each individual. So I think the chameleon reference is a really, really true and appropriate one.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they're the center of our universe, and if we adapt and support properly, then they can perform to their full potential and capabilities, and that's obviously the sole goal and objective.
Yeah. So how long have you been with Honma?
I would say I've been with Honma since kind of October 2018. I think so. We're coming up about a year and a half.
A year and a half, yeah.
Yeah, it's been so incredible, and my gosh, you don't know what you don't know until you find out that you don't know it, right? So, the learning curve has been quite steep, and it's kind of breeds new life into career. My previous life, I was the head of instruction at the National Golf Club, which, as some of us Canadians know, is argued as the top club in the country, and what a tremendous platform to leave and join the tour from. And, I was a golf coach, a club fitter for many, many years there. And then to go full time into club fitting and it's not even club fitting. It's equipment building. And it's, as Mike and I chat, it's not just grinding, it's CAD models and, iron design. And you're looking at millimeters and offsets and all of that is in the context of how does this player want to look at equipment, and how does the look affect the player's movement patterns. And so from that front, that's where the learning curve happens, is you don't realize a guy wants more offset in order to set his hands properly at address. And you hear these insights from these top level players as to how equipment helps them tick and perform.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's like your job is the next level club fitting, to have a guy, to work with a player and then them to say, okay, I want to design a whole new iron, or this is what I like. And you go through, 10, 15, 20 different models of product.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the article on Tiger's irons, that's what they were doing with to get, his iron perfect. So for you to be kind of, behind the scenes on all that to me is a whole nother level of club fitting in itself.
Yeah. And that you're absolutely right, Mike. That's where the learning curve was the biggest and the steepest for me, is I didn't know we could say yes to the things we can say yes to. And, in the old paradigm that I lived in, we would support players by changing brands or changing iron models or things of that nature. But now we're using the same iron, and we're extending the toe length, or the score lines are changing, or whatever it happens to be. I'm tucking in a heel a little bit more, or when it comes to wedges, looking at cambers and all kinds of stuff. So on that note, that's where the I guess the artistry almost comes into play. And I'd say that's where Honma's 60-year approach has really been. It's kind of artistic first, and then it turns into this beautifully crafted gear and performance-based iron, which has just been so much fun to watch the evolution of it. At least from where I started to where we are now.
Which is so cool to hear you talk about the artistic side of it, Laird, and that's obviously a little bit of the other side of the fence from where you were when we first met, which was, you sold us 4 TrackMan when we first opened Modern Golf here in Canada, and you were very much on the analytics side of things, and very data driven, and I know a lot of the practice protocols that you put in place were based around TrackMan and data and things like that. So really, really cool to hear you talk about the artistic side of that and how that influences player preference and obviously performance.
Yeah, 100, absolutely. I mean, I've been measuring things ever since I realized my growth spurt kind of skipped me, and so kind of comparing myself to others in that sense. But you're absolutely right. I mean, 10 or 12 years ago, when I was the Canadian sales rep for TrackMan, that's the world I lived in, was quantification, measurement, and applying. If we're coaching, we're looking at using a feel to change a number or things like that. But now I'm using TrackMan and other systems to share data with my team in Japan or my team in Carlsbad, and so these data collection resources allow me to kind of bring them to the fitting tee with me, even though they're not coming with me, and that's been a neat thing. But jump real quick back to the artistic side. I mean, we build our driver heads, and we start with a block of wood. I mean, we kind of, as a persimmon club first and foremost, and then it becomes what it becomes. And I had no idea, kind of thing, that was their process of kind of taking a napkin idea and putting it in a block of wood, and then having it become the TR20 460 driver eventually, right?
No, that's really cool. And obviously, from a design standpoint as well, Honma does some pretty unique stuff from a shaft design standpoint. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, they make their own shafts, and as a Japanese-based company, and you guys might be able to validate this. I caught wind, and I don't know if there's any validity to this statement, but most of the shafts that most amateur golfers and weekend warriors are playing, those shafts are manufactured in China, and result quality control may not be the same as tour level shafts, which are made in Japan. And somebody said that to me about a month ago, and I didn't realize that was the case. So from Honma's perspective, 100% of their shafts, whether you are a weekend warrior or a tour player, are made, in our factory in Sakata. And as a result, so you can imagine the tightness of quality control on that aspect. Yeah,
I mean, I think that's, a lot of people ask us about that, Laird. You're absolutely right about what is the difference between an OEM shaft, an aftermarket shaft. What is the difference between when Project X make hazardous that goes in a lot of stock product, and what is a small batch hazardous smoke product? And telling the story of the quality control, of the tighter tolerances, is kind of a testament to just trying to seek perfection. I think is trying to dial in those weight tolerances, those EI curve tolerances. I mean, down to the details of the weight of the paint, the distribution of the paint across the shaft, not to influence one section to weigh slightly more than it should. So I think when you get into those nuances in smaller quantities, generally speaking, those details really matter.
Oh, absolutely right. And that, yeah, I'm looking at some of these shaft profiles, and here's the weight painted, here's the weight unpainted, and it's you're absolutely right. So I think on that front, people don't realize the level of thought, detail, and attention that goes into building equipment. And I'm not talking about assembling grips, shafts, and heads. I'm talking about actually the manufacturing of shafts, let's say.
Laird, tell me a little bit about, if you can, just sort of, I mean, I don't want to call it Honma's secret sauce, because any secrets that are unique to the company should stay in the company, but what is unique about the proposition that Honma bring with the driver specifically? Because if in several occasions, I've heard people talk about hitting Honma drivers and experiencing sort of unique levels of ball speed, 3-4 mile an hour quicker than other industry leaders. Tell me a little bit about that, if you can.
Yeah, I think you're referring to our latest driver, which is the TR20. We have two side models. One is the 460 and the other is the 440. And the 60 head is definitely gaining a lot of traction. A lot of tour players are testing it, and some put it into play, which is really a wonderful testament to its quality. But we have seen very substantial spikes in ball speed with that. One of the things that the design team, Chris McGinley and Mark Myram, and the other team in Sakata, Suisan, and Shin-san, I'm lucky enough to be referred to as Laird-san. It's kind of company culture, which is neat. But one of the things we did with the TR20 driver is it's if you think of the chassis as a car chassis first and foremost, the crown itself is carbon and the sole itself is carbon. And so they've a chance to remove a tremendous amount of weight, which is given major flexibility from from my perspective, which is a fitting aspect. I can move center of gravities all over the place. But I think as a result of that super rigid chassis, first and foremost, they have seen substantial spikes in ball speed. And, that's caught the attention of a lot of people. Obviously, 1 mile an hour ball speed equates to, if all things are optimal, maybe 3 yards, something like that. So, you can see up to 9 or 10 yards of extra distance. And that, that's the difference between flying the bunker and not, and so on and so forth. So, I would say that I think, and I don't know this for sure, but I think that we were able to remove, by going to the carbon crown and the carbon sole design, I think we removed 34 grams of weight from the head itself, which you can imagine now you have that in your back, and you can start to do some unbelievable things from a flexibility perspective.
Yeah, I mean, you've just saved yourself 15% of the weight of the overall head, and to optimally place that exactly where you want it is quite an incredible thing. Love to hear that. Maybe tell us a little bit about sort of, obviously Honma are known for their high-end Berez line, some really unique pieces in that, a real luxury product. I know that's not so much your bread and butter, but tell us a little bit about sort of that side of Honma.
Yeah, that Berez line we call it super premium, and it really does is it caters to the status symbol aspect of certain people's lives. And if you fit in that mold, you drive this level Mercedes, and you have this particular watch, and you carry this Berez 4 or 5 star set of golf clubs, and they can run you the price of an automobile. And by the way, I was speaking to John Kawaja, and he says he's got some coming your way, so look for that in the weeks. Just on a side note, but the neat thing about the Berez line, I've actually hit them, and I thought, like, oh my gosh, is this just is this just gold plated stuff, and I'm just going to pay for it, or is there a performance aspect to it? And I couldn't believe, I'm hitting my 747 V irons. This is back probably 6 or 8 months ago, and I throw a Berez 4 star into my hand, and the ball flies 12 yards farther consistently. And if I had the dollars, I'd probably put a set in my bag and see it. But they're gorgeous to look at. They're very blingy, I would call it. I mean, they don't go under the radar by all means, and I think that's on purpose as well. But learning that lineup and the 2 star to 5 star aspects, and the increase in gold plating and gold in the ferrules and gold woven into the shafts has been a real neat discovery process from my aspect, for sure.
I know when Ian and I were at Honma end of January, we hit one of the, I think it was a 7-iron. We only hit a couple shots with it, no quad
Felt
on
different though, didn't it?
Felt so good. I mean, for an iron that's built up like that, let's call it a game improvement iron. Generally, those are clicky and bulky and feel chunky. This just felt like you said I could put a set in the bag, no problem. I think we both looked at each other, and the guy that helped us out, John came out after as well. But we were all kind of staring at it, going, "There's definitely something into this iron," because we really, really were impressed.
Yeah, it's neat. I think you guys called me actually that day, and I was heartbroken to find out that I was 30 minutes away as far as just leaving the office and driving down to the airport in San Diego, unfortunately.
Well, it was an absolute, it was a happy mistake that we even found it, because we were looking for a Starbucks, and there we turn up and there's Honma HQ right there. So if we had certainly known it was as close as we were we were making a trip over to Oceanside, if we knew it was that close, we would have given you a shout well in advance, that's for sure.
Yeah. It's a beautiful headquarters, isn't it? We've been there.
It really is. Yeah, I mean, it's so clean. I love the fact the build shop is right there next to the hitting bay, and I can just imagine from a practical fitting standpoint being able to go from one to the other and make subtle adjustments. Maybe if you're working with wedges or irons, okay, grind a little bit off here and go back. Okay, how do you like the feel of that? And really get into the weeds with it and start doing work.
That's exactly the level of service that Honma House is offering. Is our builders are also our fitters, as you guys are doing this. You're absolutely right. We can do literally anything, and players walking out with their equipment that day in that moment, and so that level of service I think is unmatched. Quite frequently, right? I mean that very few people can offer that kind of attention. I also love the address. It's Innovation Way, which I don't know if was by design. But that's kind of just, to me, I think the address is a nice summary of what the intent behind the whole project is.
Laird, can you talk about TR20B yet or no?
Yeah, they're probably the most beautiful blades I've ever looked at in my life, and I'm not sure if you guys have seen them in person. That's what you're talking about, the blade irons, Mike?
Yeah, the blade. Yeah, I remember you and I chatted about this a couple weeks ago, and we haven't seen them yet, but the story behind them on how they're made is impressive. So I thought I'd ask you.
Yeah, they're not out on the market yet, but they're in play by a handful of players, and they're in relation to the original Rose Protos that came out about a year ago, or actually about 18 months ago. The finish is different. We've moved away from the darker finish with the Rose Protos into a little bit more of a satin. Kind of more traditional, and you'll notice that the shape itself is really softened around the toe profile and the heel edge cutaways. And man, it just, some of the feedback that tour players have given me specifically is that the blade leaves the turf quickly. They feel like it's fast through the turf, which is a wonderful feedback resource that they've provided. And we've seen great results right away with it, which is wonderful.
Yeah, that's such a brilliant little nugget right there, Laird, with regards to what tour players look for. And that turf interaction is so commonly at the forefront of their mind when they're trying new product. It has to make its way in and out the turf in a really efficient fashion and giving them the necessary feedback in order to make it in the bag. Have you found that working with some of the best players?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we've had to get pretty darn creative over the last couple of weeks. And last week I've been working with a player through FaceTime and lots of messaging and lots of screenshots and so on and so forth. But he's got the 20Bs in his testing regime right now. He's going through it, and he found that the first set we sent him didn't have enough bounce for his style of delivery, and so he felt that slight dig to it. He liked the lead edge profile. He liked the camber on the front, but he just found that we needed, let's say, a couple more degrees of bounce. So the team, without changing the look of the iron in any way, we went back to Sakata in Japan, and the team milled a brand new set with added bounce on the sole, and he's testing it this week. And immediately the feedback was the club is leaving the turf faster. And so, the bounce playing a role to stop the club from digging. And it's interesting, actually. He felt that when the club was digging, it almost felt like he was hitting the ball heavy, even though that wasn't the case. It was just the sensation. And as soon as the new set of irons went into his hands, it was a totally different response to the way the ball felt coming off the face.
And that's trying to explain that to a player that low point is occurring 3 to 5 inches ahead of impact. The ball is essentially on its journey by the time you get this, by the time this sort of deep part of the divot is occurring. So it really doesn't have a great influence on the ball flight, but it's the feedback that they're looking for, where they don't want the acceleration of the club to be disturbed on the way through the turf. And at times, whether, explaining that to the average golfer can be quite difficult. And I've found, Laird, that from a head design standpoint, people talk about forgiveness as a form of size of cavity. Well, I find sole design is equally as impactful when it comes to retaining ball speed through the strike, and that's purely down to sole design.
Yes, 100%. I totally agree with that. And yeah, you're absolutely right. And this particular player that I'm referencing has a lot of shaft lean, so you can imagine a normal bounce, you take a lot off, even though he's not that steep on the ball. He's got a bunch of shaft lean through the shot. So having that extra bounce to get the club to leave the turf was exactly what needed to happen. And so you don't know until you test one. And actually, that's an interesting thing. So in my experience of working with dozens of tour players over the last 18 months, the first meeting is always, how do I describe it? It's always okay, now what do we do? Now we know what to do next. So the first one is, let's say I show up with the equipment, based on whatever their agents have shared with me. Okay. And even then it's marginally a guess. And then take it a step farther. Do we measure things differently than the other companies do? And most of the time we get it really, really close, but then second meeting is always, okay, now we know exactly what's going on. Here you go. And we're off to the races. So it's been a neat, which I love, because it gets me working with a multitude of different players more than just once. And that's, as a result, I've built some pretty nice relationships and learned a lot of cool stories. And gosh, these guys' lives are just never a dull moment.
I think the cool thing with that TRB iron as well is because it's milled. I mean, you and I were chatting, and you were saying it takes a day to mill one head. So in order for the ability for you to work with a player, and then they say, I don't like this, I don't like that, and you can take those notes and send them to Japan and then get them back and get him a set that's 100% built right to him, like per grind and everything like that. I think that again, it's next level. I think that's where maybe in 10 years that's where the industry will go, because you'll be able to machine these heads quicker and in an easier way to get them done here, kind of thing. But that story behind that TR20 B is very, very impressive.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, Mike. You're right. Every iron is milled right now, and eventually they'll go forged production. But each player that's playing the clubs is playing literally a set one of one, and that's kind of the bespoke service that Honma is providing to these tour players, and they really. I mean, we have a player who's put our B irons into play for, I think, ever since. Can't remember the event. I want to say it was, oh gosh, not Pebble Beach, but Waste Management. And anyway, we're testing, we're playing, we're getting lots of feedback. And one of the things that we did is we actually moved center of gravities in the irons to change spin rates and ball flights. And as a result, he's playing a bit of a blended set. Some of the long irons have the different center of gravities, and some of the short irons have the other, and it's all designed for higher ball flight with the long stuff, flatter ball flight with the short irons, and you can imagine. I mean, these players are looking at us going, "You're doing what for me?" and making me feel like I am as special as I am, and I think that's going a long way, and we're starting to get noticed on that front.
Yeah, it says some really special treatment, making the players feel like they can basically have anything they want, and that would be, I would imagine, a big thing when these guys are choosing what staff they want to be on, that they can get such unique treatment like that. So I'm sure that's a a real win for Honma. Tell us a little bit about some of the sort of interactions. I know you've worked with some real legends of the game, and you work with some great players. What are some of the kind of key or some of the memories that you've kind of you've got from the last 18 months, Laird?
I mean, the last 18 months, I've had the tremendous honor and luxury of working with it's either 4 or 5 current or former world number 1 players, and you can imagine each one of them's approach to getting to the top of the mountain has been unique, and some of their stories are just absolutely incredible. I had the luxury. I was at the Champions Tour event at the Hogue Classic. Actually, one of our great Canadian, David Moreland III, went bonanza and shot 60 in the first round, and I think he finished top 10, which is amazing. And actually, somebody was telling me about the way he qualified for the event. There was a fire or something. I'm not sure. I got to find out more about the story because I just caught wind of it this morning, believe it or not. But anyway, I was working with a guy. I'll use his initials, BL. We call him BL. And you guys can derive it from there. I'll leave it to that. But
yeah, we'll let people figure it out.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. So BL loves lots of offset, so we built him a set of irons with 4.5 millimeters of offset consistent through his forehand right through his wedge. And that's a player that also likes to use offset to set his hands. However, the wonderful thing about, we showed up on the range before everybody. We trained the entire day, and we were still the last person on the range after everybody had come, warmed up, and wanted to play their pro-am, stuff like that. But, the kindness of these guys is that he wouldn't let me leave without sitting and having lunch with him on each day, which is kind of nice. So, and during our lunch, it's tons of these stories. And, I've got my colleague Preston Toulon with me, who's my product coordinator. And thankfully, he's arguably our glue that holds our tour department together. Preston starts by saying, "Hey, what's the worst score you've ever had on a hole?" I said, I kind of give him an elbow going, "Preston, you ask these guys the opposite question." Okay. And it's amazing. He starts off with a quadruple bogey 8. Very next hole, he makes a double bogey, and he's thinking okay. And by the way, this is the start of tournament on Thursday, and he's going, okay, let me rebook my plans. I'm on my way, right, type thing. And sure enough, third hole, he makes eagle, and so he's still 4 over par. And by the end of the tournament, he finishes 3rd. And so you imagine the grit of these guys to turn things around and just never ever give up. And anyway, it's just gosh, I love that story. I'll tell you another one. 2 of these former world number 1 players. One is BL, and he looks down at the first set of irons that I presented to him. And he tells me I need way more offset. And I presented another set of irons to another player, and he says I need way less offset. And and so you're taking 6 irons and turning them into 7 irons, taking the bounce out and taking the offset out, and basically putting a 7-iron stamp on a 6-iron head. Wait, did I get that wrong? Maybe flip it. But anyway, to me, the way these guys tick has been just such an eye-opening experience, and my goodness, it's been really neat. I'll tell you one more quick story about BL. I was finished my testing report with him, and I had to share some data with the team, and he had 5 irons. And one of the primary objectives is that he wants his clubs to go a certain yardage. He's not looking for the longest, he wants the ball to go the correct distance. And of course, that has to do with the pin high conversation and proximity to the hole, obviously. When I was sharing my report, I happened to click on the average for these 5 irons that he hit. And on the side profile, the ball flight looked like it was 1 golf shot. And it was just, I just couldn't believe the level of repeatability from his delivery aspect, and just the response to golf ball was just so predictable, and it'd be nice to play golf that way. I tell you, for sure.
Laird, you talk about data there, and is there any way you can dive into that 60%, 70% thing you and I were chatting about a couple of weeks ago?
Oh man, that's I love that you brought that up, Mike. Thanks. I would call myself a fitting analyst, and I think that since joining the tour, and thanks to ShotLink and other clubs like or other programs like Waggle. You guys know Waggle, the 15th club. It's a resort tour players can access. And anyway, you just start to do crazy levels of data mining. And what my goal was to see if I could come up with a story that would tell us what direction to go, either A, from a practice perspective, or B, from a thought process, or even from an equipment perspective. And one of the discoveries that came from kind of my last year of data mining is I found out one of the players I was working with, every time they finished in the top 10 of the competition, they had, over the course of 4 days, hit an average of 60% of their fairways and 70% of their greens. And so we coined the term the 60-70 rule, and that was really the intent for the player. And if we can improve the number of clean lie shots that are hit from the fairway, then we can control ball flight, and therefore we can control distance, and we can control proximity, and so on and so forth. And so the 60-70 rule became a real major focus for some of the players that we were working with throughout the course of last year.
Yeah, I think that's something that the tour players do so well, and so much better than the average golfer, Laird, is they understand the analytics and sort of the things that their game is held up on. And I'm really excited to start working more with programs like Arcos here at TXG, and offer our clients the same sort of experience where we can sort of maybe dive into their analytics with them and help them understand why their scores aren't coming down, because there's no doubt about it, in the day-to-day sort of working with these people, we see how much better they leave the bay, and when they're striking it, and they see their distance improves and their accuracy improves. And then you'll maybe touch base with them a couple of months later, and you'll maybe hear, well, I'm hitting it better, but I'm not really scoring much better. But the analytics are going to be, that's where the key is going to be to helping them lower those scores.
Absolutely. I mean, there's two parts that I think about where my mind goes is, one, thinking about these tour players. Yes, they have analytics in their back pocket, but somehow they separate themselves from the outcome or the stats of it throughout the rounds, which is so impressive to me. They can actually just down and play golf and be the athlete that they need to be, and then be the bean counter afterwards when they're doing their post rounds and things like that. But then the other is that, while we can't control score, we know what metrics contribute to score. So, greens and reg, I would suggest, is one of the most important statistics for changing your score on the golf course. And, okay, well, how do we increase our number of greens and reg? Well, we've got to, obviously do a better job of tee shots off the, driver shots off the tee, and so on and so forth. And so I don't know if people actually know how to play golf. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just think if they could be a little bit more process oriented, and I have a philosophy from a coaching perspective. I call it the 4 majors, and I'm not talking about the masters and stuff like that. I'm talking about tee shots, approach shots, wedge shots, and putts. And to me, there's a mission and a bonus associated with each one of those aspects. And my tee shot mission is to find my ball. And I ask a lot of people, I say, what's your mission with your tee shot? They're like, wow, they hit a 280 and in the center of the fairway. I'm like, man, that's a lot of pressure before you even pull the trigger, and you're guaranteed to be let down when the ball doesn't do that, because it's probably not going to do that. And so by flipping your mindset and maybe possibly lowering your standards to get into a better performance state, maybe you do actually tap into the athlete that should be hitting those shots and manage your way around a golf course on a little bit higher level. So yeah, you're right. I think if people started to look at, and you're right, Arcos does the job for the people, does it not? I mean, that's
yeah, it does. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, they've partnered with Microsoft to develop the sort of smart caddy program, where it will basically tell you the percentage play once it has enough data from you. So I mean, it's an incredible program, and I think the help people can get managing themselves around the golf course, eliminating penalty shots, choosing the right clubs off tees, making better decisions. I mean, that can surely have the biggest impact of all when it comes to driving those scores down.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no question about that. And then the other is, are people comfortable shooting lower scores? I mean, we have this thing called our comfort zone, and And these days, my comfort zone is sitting on the floor with my 2.5-year-old. But no, you think about score range, and if we get 2 or 3 or 4 shots ahead of our comfort zone score range, what do? We bosh it to get back to the norm, and I think people really should push the limits of that. So, yeah, I think we should do more educational seminars on how to arrive at the scores you desire. I mean, that would be a huge thing. It's easy to talk about it and put it onto a chalkboard, but and difficult to put into play. But if people have that information in their back pocket, they can eventually tap into that. Is my belief system for sure.
No, I love that. Laird, in this sort of semi-transition, I mean, I love there's 3 keys here, 3 pillars that you're talking about. You've got you're a teacher, you're a club fitter, and you're a fitting analyst. And I think all of those skill sets, are unique in a sense, but they do fuse together so well to deliver a great package for the player. How have you found sort of having the ability at one point to have worn one of those 3 hats, and now you can slip one on and one off when the time sort of requires?
Yeah, it's nice to have a pretty deep toolbox. I must admit that's you're absolutely right. I mean, go way back. I was part of the team in the group that was starting the Titleist Fit Center at Eagle's Nest, and I remember signing on with Henry and Henry pointing to an area saying that's where the building is going to be, and so and then of course we 5 years later, I'm so burned out of fitting, I had to switch gears and get into some junior golf coaching so I could just free my mind up. But it's really neat because I think that my approach, a lot of the driver testing we do is actually on a golf course. We go find a place and set up a TrackMan and have it on the tee deck, but we'll try to find a hard wind from the left that is that the player doesn't like, let's say, and we'll do some driver testing in that environment, because I think the driving range, you can fall into the trap of ball speed and just yardage and distance, and it's a wide open space without any consequences, and so on that front, trying to really put our gear through the ringer so that it holds up under the competition or the pressures of the competition. In that sense, the other cool thing is that going into the data aspect and sharing these stories, people kind of go like, well, where did you think of that? And I've in test center, let's say, I'll build challenges that will test a player in certain yardage ranges that I think they can improve upon, and so you're right. There's a little bit more of maybe a complete or multi-dimensional approach that I think plays a nice role in my approach to helping them.
Yeah, no, I love that. Well, my friend, it's I love hearing from you, and I love hearing all these stories. I hate that you're on the West Coast and we're a little further east and we don't get to see you more often, but it certainly helps being able to do stuff like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to the time when we can actually get back on airplanes, and you guys will be my when I touch down in Toronto. I miss the place. It's funny on the West Coast, Toronto gets poo-pooed a lot, and I defend it like crazy. And a lot of times you ask, "Hey, have you been to Toronto?" No. I said it's the best city in our country. And I think it is.
I do. Yeah. No, we're very, very fortunate, and I think it's underrated from a golf course perspective as well. I think we have a lot of incredible golf courses around the GTA.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding? If you're absolutely right. I mean, a 1 week golf trip in the Toronto area would be on a lot of people's bucket list. If only they knew that would be.
If only they knew.
Yeah, if only they knew is right. So
we'll keep it as our secret, and we'll keep it all to ourselves, Lairdo.
Yeah, that's it. Faster rounds of golf and preferred tee times as a result, hopefully, right? So, guys, it's a tremendous honor. Thanks for thinking of me and the opportunity to share my
Not at all.
ideas.
Awesome. All right, pal.
Perfect.
Lairdo, talk to you soon. Take care, bud.
All the best, you guys. See you later.
You too.